Good afternoon to everyone with us. On behalf of the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, I would like to welcome you at another lecture of the JP2 Lectures series this academic year. The series is organized by the St. John Paul II Institute of Culture, which is part of our Faculty of Philosophy here at the Angelicum. Today's lecture, as well as the entire JP2 lecture series, could not have taken place without the support of our university authorities, whom I would like to thank. Special thanks are owed to the founders of the Institute, our donors and supporters, and to our audience gathered here at Angelicum, as well as joining us via internet connection. The St. John Paul II Institute of Culture was established to look at the challenges facing the modern church and world in light of the thought and heritage of St. John Paul II. The idea of thinking with John Paul II has been embodied in the JP2 lecture series, which are cyclical public lectures of prominent interdisciplinary scholars who revisit the extraordinary contributions of John Paul II for our own day. Today, it is my great honor to introduce to you Professor Krzysztof Zanussi, an awarded film and theater director, producer, screenwriter, book author, and academic professor. Before graduating from Łódź Film School in 1967, he studied physics and philosophy. He has authored and directed over 40 feature films, as well as documentaries and theater productions. Among many other film awards, he received the Golden Lion at the 1984 Venice Film Festival for Year of the Quiet Sun, and the jury prize, as well as the prize of the ecumenical jury at the 1918 Cannes Film Festival for The Constant Factor. He has taught at film schools, including Łódź Film School, the National Film Schools in Britain and in Denmark, Columbia University in New York, and the University of Silesia in Katowice. He was president of the Federation of European Film Directors in 1990-1994. He has been a member of the European Film Academy and of the Pontifical Academy of Fine Arts and Letters of the Virtuosi al Pantheon, as well as serving as a consultant of the Pontifical Commission for Culture. Professor Zanussi will deliver a lecture titled, "Is There a Place for Cinema on Olympus? Cinema and Values." Professor Zanussi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and please don't expect an academic lecture, even if I have a title of an academic professor. My title to meet you is linked to art, to cinema. It's not academic at all. I mentioned Olympus in the title. Why Olympus? Maybe because it's a brand name of my little photo camera, but besides, it is an expression of a complex, inferiority complex that I have as a filmmaker. Because cinema is a very new discipline of art. So new that it recently celebrated 100 years of existence. What is 100 compared to thousands of years of literature, of painting, of music, of dance, and suddenly we have only 120 years of cinema, more or less approximately. It reminds me a story from one of the Woody Allen films, when he talks about a person who has inferiority complex and goes to the psychiatrist, to the shrink, to get some help. After many sessions, psychiatrist tells the patient, I have good news for you. You have no inferiority complex whatsoever. You are simply inferior. So as a filmmaker, I feel inferior compared to theater, to literature, painting, music, dance, and so on. However, it happened that during lifespan of my own life, cinema or audiovisual narration became dominant in all communication in developed countries. So the time of printed word was very short, something like from Gutenberg to 20th century, 5 centuries, and now printed word is less and less common, less and less in use. Whenever I have to give my address, I look for a ball pen, and other people take their telephone, and it is all in, in images. However, the importance of new audiovisual means has to do with great sociological changes. And my question about the dignity of my muse of film, is this muse worth being invited to Olympus? My doubt is linked to the fact that many people don't notice, don't recognize the natural stratification in the world of art. There is high art and there is a low art, which because of courtesy is called popular art. But what is popular is low by definition. And if you take a Gauss curve, you see that whenever statistic is concerned, the majority is mediocre, excellence, and let us say undevelopment are on the two edges and are less represented. However, the history of humanity was always linked to the high culture. That was the most dynamic, inspiring part of human creation. And the rest was following this elite, if you want to call it, this part which was linked to the, let us say, sophisticated art. Cinema started very poorly as an attraction of kermesse, was very popular with very simple people, even the original unliterate people. There were sometimes some captions on the screen, and in old cinemas, somebody was reading it loud because many people didn't know writing and reading. So the beginning was very humble, but in a certain moment, in the 30s of last century, cinema became an extension of theater. And in my opinion, I like to create controversy, cinema is an art of the world, not of the image. Image in asemantic kind of expression, like music TV, like advertisement, that's the place where cinema is practically only audiovisual, but all the rest, all narrative, is about words. There are words, there are dialogues, there are people talking to each other. When you look at the statistics, a great majority of images that you have on your computers are two people talking. And usually you see them from one side, from opposite side, reverse angle, and that's it is unchanged in decades. More or less we tell the same thing. Maybe it is worthwhile to stop for a moment on this notion of narrative. We are telling stories. If I try to define my profession, I would say I am a storyteller. And I would like to bring to you one observation. It will be in my film, but it is a short dialogue in Hebrew, and usually the audience doesn't notice it, so I quote it as a separate observation. Do you know that storytelling was one of the most privileged professions among prisoners of gulags and concentration camps? Medical doctor, engineer without instruments is helpless. What can he do? Good advice. And the storyteller, the librarian, or the writer, was able to tell every evening a part of the novel, a story, and that was bringing other prisoners in their minds out of the captivity towards freedom. So, sociologically speaking, librarian was a very good profession for the bad time of the prison. And when we look at the development of life on this planet, notice that we humans, we make the only exception that shows that story may be told from generation to generation, from valley to valley, territorially and in the time. We know our past, we know what happened to our grandparents, and we know what happened before Punition wars. No other living entities could have the same experience. I have 8 dogs. None of them knows the story of their grandfather. No way. They cannot transmit it. So it is something important. And when you think about the contents, the value of the what cinema can convey, you may easily notice that there is a certain place for sophisticated, deeply motivated spiritually art, and there is popular art, which is very often very far from wisdom, is very often simply stupid, but is entertaining. We have a problem with the English which I'm using now, because in Anglo-Saxon vocabulary, something what we call in Europe culture is called entertainment. It is very degrading. I don't want to admit that I work in entertainment, but I'm proud that I work in culture. It's not a guarantee that I do things which are good, but I try. Anyway, what was highbrow and what was lowbrow is not very much distinguished nowadays, because popular art is paying millions and sophisticated art is not paying millions. Look what a change. In time of Mozart was earning fortune. He knew how to lose it, but he was paid by the emperor, he was paid by the prince, he was paid by the bishop, and all his sponsors were highly qualified consumers of sophisticated art. So they paid well. At the same time, in a tavern, some local singer was singing to the local public, collecting some pennies, but she was poor and Mozart was rich. Now it is exactly opposite way around. First of all, we have very few sponsors who have some cultural aspirations and who are willing to share their wealth like prince or bishop did in the past. So this is changing a little bit the image, and we tend to flatter popular art in order to express our respect that they are rich, that they have lots of money. Now, I would like to bring one more, where I wrote a little list of the filmmakers whom I trust or trusted, because most of them are dead, who were trying to create this kind of highbrow cinematic culture and bring some spiritual values. And I think they succeeded. I would start with Karl Dreyer. I have Robert Bresson. I look whom I have next. Well, definitely Ingmar Bergman as the greatest classic. Andrei Tarkovsky, very important name. Terence Malick, if you want. Martin Scorsese. Peter Weir. Louis Buñuel. All these artists, Mel Gibson. Well, there's not a full list. Akira Kurosawa. And I try to pronounce him in a very Japanese way, but I'm afraid it is not perfect. I know no accent. Akira Kurosawa, all flat. And Satyajit Ray. That's easier pronunciation. I just quote these artists because most of their work is oriented towards some serious aesthetical and intellectual values. There is also popular art where you have great audiences, great money, but more banalities, more things which are obvious. And that's why I like to bring one notion which is not very popular among the critics, which is wisdom. The work which is valuable has to convey some wisdom, must not be stupid. If it is stupid, it is not great work of art. And whatever is stupid sells well because it gives satisfaction to people who are also very often stupid. There is a saying that stupidity is also a gift of God, but should not be used too often. So, in case of cinema, I'm afraid it is quite popular. And now, what I would like to accentuate is the fact that cinema, like all narrative art, gives a diagnosis of the world, but also shows the horizon of dreams, of what is our desire. And here we are at the moment, in our developed world, in a total mess. Because most of the dreams which are popular are totally contradictory and absolutely unapplicable. We want what we wanted in the 19th century, freedom of every and respect to every individual, independent from how does this individual conduct him or herself. We want access to health service free. We want everybody to be assisted if handicapped. All these things are absolutely correct. Many of them have been achieved in 20th century, but at the same time, if they are really applied, you have to accept sacrifice, you have to accept high taxes, you have to accept great effort to achieve these values. And who is producing dreams offers you an image that everything can be given free and that you are worth it. I wonder what we are worth. So, if I can accentuate the value of dreams, this value is linked to the reality. And if we dream about something that may kill us, it is not a good dream. It is a bad dream. And our civilization evolves with incredible acceleration, especially in the last, let us say, 40, 50 years. And there is this acceleration. We can see that human individual in our evolution is unapt to transform himself, herself, to the level which is expected from us. Life we are having now is so different from the life of our grandparents, and we are evolving very slowly. So maybe on the horizon there is a catastrophe, because we won't be able to adopt human species to the new world. And it has to do with the question of progress, definition what we believe is progressive and what is not. And very often I see that people believe that whatever progressive is good, and I know, at least from my close contact to Russia, that Russians know that usually old thing is better than the new one, especially when cars are concerned. Because when in Togliatti the Italian Fiat was produced, older it was, more reliable it was. Then it was becoming worse and worse. So they were buying old cars more willingly than the new ones. It is just to think, because many people who claim to be progressive reveal the vision of society which was already tested in 18th century, in time of libertarianism. And look what happened to all these characters, from Marquis de Sade to Liaison Dangereux. Many of them finished on guillotine. So it is not a good choice, and it's not a progressive one. Well, I wanted to give you some general view, but I'm very tempted to switch now to John Paul II, his teaching and his person. And this will be little my partisan contribution to your series, because I'm strongly convinced that there is one very little known aspect of his pontificate that maybe in 100 years will be considered as a crucial one. Before I get to it, I have still some time, so I can tell you about my personal experience. I met John Paul II very long time ago when he was an auxiliary bishop of Krakow. And from that time, I noticed something very, very precious and very specific to him. He was extremely attentive in contact with people. I was a student. I was in somebody's home, invited for dinner with my colleague, and this new bishop asked courtesy question, who are you, why do you study philosophy, and so on. But it struck me that he listened to my answers. Normally, no people, they never listen to the answer. You just ask the question, that's enough. That's a courtesy. When you say, how are you, you don't expect somebody to tell that he has arthritis and some problems with his teeth. You expect that somebody will say, I am fine, you are fine. So that was personalism in practice. And I think I consider it very, very precious that he had this desire to concentrate on one human being. I remember his surrounding was always complaining that John Paul II was notoriously late. But he himself said it is not negligence. The person I speak to is for me at this moment more important than the person who is waiting. You have to make a choice. And he was making this choice in favor of person that he was talking to. And I later on had this, well, when he was elected a pope. I was in Mexico. I had my retrospective, and I knew that at the press conference, nobody will talk about my films, that everybody will be asking me about the Pope. So I prepared an answer, and I'm very proud of it, because the first question was, do you know the new Pope? And I said, yes, but I did know John 23rd, I did know Paul VI, I did know John Paul I, but this is the first Pope who knows me. And this is a substantial difference. It happened later, by coincidence, not by my desire or my choice, that I was offered to make a biographical film about him at the very beginning of his pontificate. Mission impossible. How can you make a dramatic film when there is no room for conflict? I cannot judge somebody who is in the beginning of his activity, and I cannot create situations where I will say, here he made a mistake, here he was right, here he was wrong. No. Andrzej Tarkowski, with whom I spoke about my challenge, suggested something what I think was the best suggestion. He said, make him a witness of his epoch, but not a protagonist. Of course, public will be a little bit disappointed, because they would like to have gossip, they would like to have scandal, they will have to have indiscretion, and instead they will have a panoramic view of my country, which explains where he comes from and who was he before he became a pope. The production of this film is a pile of anecdotes and stories. They are endless, and if by the end anybody wants to hear some of them, I am ready, but it is not a serious subject matter. Later on, I was again as a producer and at the end as a director involved in a production of his stage play, Our God's Brother, that he has written when he was in his 20s, when he was a vicar in the neighborhood of Krakow. It is a very, to me, surprising work, originally rejected by Catholic editing house, and the lady who read first few pages told young Wojtyła, take more care about your parish and forget about writing. Fortunately, she did not destroy the manuscript, and when he became a bishop, she read the text again and up to the end, and next morning she went to confession. So she understood that she underestimated great originality of his thought. Imagine that the future pope, being a modest vicar in the province, writes a play where Vladimir Lenin is a character. And he writes dialogue to Lenin and makes a polemic between him and the protagonist who is Christian and future saint. This is only the only case in history that the writer made his protagonist a saint. But that happened later. However, artistically, Our God's Brother is very far from perfection, but is very promising, even in form. Great description of schizophrenia, where author was quite competent, and many psychiatrists say that this is one of the best expressions of this terrible disease. And at the same time, the intellectual content of this play is far ahead his time, and he was simply, by his co-believers, not recognized, what happened to many people before and after, so it is almost typical. And now I would like to use my last minutes to something what I am very keen to transmit, and it is to many people a total surprise. Usually it is believed that John Paul II will be remembered for his contribution to the destruction of communism and Marxist philosophy. Probably it is great merit, but as communism and Marxism are not very much alive, I think they are already in agony. So in, in maybe 100 years, this merit will be downgraded. But there is one little episode of his pontificate that maybe opens a new century, and very few people know about it. As you know, John Paul II was very keen on science, and as an optimist, he denied a common opinion in the church that science in 19th century went away from faith and started modern atheism. It is not historically quite correct, but I'm not an authority on that field. But John Paul II had contact, by help of some professors, with modern science, and he noticed something what is absolutely revolutionary. He noticed that as St. Thomas Aquinas was updated in all his writing with all the science available of his time, it's time now to use the instrument of modern science and quantum physics in particular to talk theology in a way that will be not traditionally, historically based on St. Thomas Aquinas only and on Greek philosophy behind. This was formulated before the encyclica Faith and Reason was Fides et Ratio was published. It was 1988 in June. You may dig up to the Acta Apostolica or to the Osservatore Romano. There is a statement that was written for John Paul II when he proclaimed this new perspective. And strangely enough, it is well described, disappeared. And Pope read for the anniversary of Newton a text which was totally different and alien to him. He has never seen it before. Somebody has changed the text. It was later on discovered that it was intentionally done, correctly in a way, because this proclamation of the Pope was so revolutionary, and so few people amongst theologians were apt to use instruments of modern science, that it could have been an invitation for all these loonies from New Age that would be invited to create new theology. It was too early. And that's why Pope decided to downgrade this text and publish it as a letter to his astronomer, Father Coyne, who was president of the Vatican Observatory. You all remember that Pope is responsible for calendar and must have his astronomer, if he wants or not. But this is subject what is rather historical. The Specola di Vaticano is quite a good observatory and working, of course, not in Castel Gandolfo when the tourists visit an old telescope, but in Texas. And this letter was published, and maybe one day will be a great inspiration for the new wave of theology because people are curious of God, and the old language is not very convincing, is not very communicative, it's repetitive. I don't want to bring here the criticism of theology as such, but we all feel that theology is not flourishing discipline today, that it is a little bit, how would I say, sclerotic. And of course, this is the invitation to theologians: go ahead and learn something about this paradoxical knowledge which is now appearing, where the whole logics is different, and something in modern physics may exist and not exist at the same time. I don't want to parodize the new physics, but it is so deeply surprising that it is worthwhile to think about it. There is in Krakow Copernicus Institute, paid by the Templeton Prize, that Polish theologian and physicist and astrophysicist Professor Heller has developed. He, together with Archbishop Życiński, who was also having a scientific background, they were both behind this initiative of the Pope, but Pope understood it very deeply and admitted that probably it is still too early, that you have to prepare people to be apt to work both in theology and use methods, use concepts that modern physics is suggesting. It will make easier to admit what we have in the gossip when Christ answers Pharisees who are asking, when in paradise I will be sitting, if I had one wife, she died, I have a second one, who will be sitting on the left, who will be sitting on the right? And Christ answers, it will be all different. And we have to admit it, that what we believe, if we believe that there is another world, this other world will be different. It will be different in notion of time. It will be different in notion of space, if any. And we have to follow what is the last line of my film, if you go to see it, line of Shakespeare, who says that there are things on this earth that our philosophers never thought about, that there is mystery. And science today is rediscovering mystery. In the 19th century, it lost the notion of mystery, of something what is unknown and will remain unknown. That's the mystery. The rest is a puzzle, is a secret that will be once or later or earlier revealed. But something is not going to be revealed ever, because on this earth we have 3 dimensions, and we have linear perception of time. Immanuel Kant told us, don't take it as universal. It is only human perception, but reality is more complex. And we should face our days, the vision of God, as far more complex and far more mysterious than we admit it. And I think here audiovisual has a great role to play, because it is possible to express with audiovisual. All these authors I quoted were dealing with mystery, were dealing with these surprising aspects of human life that we try to neglect or rationalize, forgetting that mystical knowledge is as valid as rational knowledge, and they both can lead us to better understanding of our human condition. I think I didn't go behind the time, and whatever is going to happen probably now is our conversation. Is it right?
Professor Zanussi, thank you very much for your presentation. Now, I'm pleased to introduce and give the floor to Dr. Mateusz Werner, who will be the moderator of the discussion that follows the lecture we have just listened to. Mateusz Werner is a philosopher of culture, film historian, author and lecturer. He taught at the Łódź Film School, the University of Warsaw, and currently is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Humanities of the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. He is editor of the Kronos Quarterly and of the books What Kieślowski Tells Us Today and Polish Cinema Now. Dr. Werner, welcome and please join us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Professor Zanussi, I would like to start with a site-specific question. What is your personal relationship with Rome, with this city, with Rome? What kind of experience, personal experience, do you have with this specific place, which is very cinematic, by the way?
I try to avoid any contact at all.
In what sense?
Because it is nonsensical. It is just, to me, something what is decadent, destructive, irresponsible. So why should I care?
I thought you had some adventures, intellectual adventures or personal adventures in Rome, because Rome is also a saint place.
Oh, yes, it is, but believe me, 15 years in Pontifical Commission for Culture is a great test of my faith, and I survived it. I didn't lose it. That's already a success.
Okay, I will not dig deeper in this matter, but I would like to see one day your version of Rome, the sequel of the film which was made by Fellini, because I think you belong to this great generation of filmmakers. You have mentioned a list of filmmakers for whom this highbrow art was meaningful, and Fellini, of course, delivered very mixed in terms of decadence and sophisticated past image of the city, but I understand your exhaustion, I would say. Okay, so let's jump into the problem which you have mentioned in last words of your presentation, of your lecture. There is a popular image of highbrow artists, the stereotypical image, that the artist must be a humanist who deals with fantasies, who sometimes denies the reality because he wants to create a new social order, new cultural structures. Your approach to film art and to the art in general is, however, quite different. You studied physics, as Father Director mentioned already, and you were always interested what scientific knowledge says us about the world, about the foundation of our world. In what sense contemporary science inspires you in your work? Could you tell us your story in this perspective?
I would say maybe rather some people inspire me, because my knowledge of contemporary science is very close to zero. The fact that 50 years ago I studied physics doesn't mean very much. Even since then, physics has changed dramatically, and that's impossible to be updated. But I see that especially in quantum physics, there are new perspectives of understanding the matter, of understanding time and space, and gives us many surprising hints that things which we believe are superstition are in fact reflection of some reality. What is premonition? Why in so many places of the world sometimes some people dream something what is going to happen? Why science says that future is already existing, only we don't have access to it. But some people maybe in a way, partial way, have some intuition what is the future. Physics says it is absolutely acceptable as a concept. And of course, in 19th century, this would be considered as a total superstition and lack of criticism. So now we reform our proud vision of the world which we can investigate and be sure that empiric proof is there. I like very much in my film, which if you are going to see it, notice it is said, I think, twice in the film that blind chance is a way how God manifests himself in our world and remains unnoticed. Just blind chance.
Do you think that modern science could be a source for metaphysical curiosity? Leszek Kołakowski, Polish philosopher, was talking about metaphysical sensitivity. This is exactly what we are losing today. More and more people simply are not interested in certain kind of questions. Do you think that paradoxically scientific investigation could be a trigger for this kind of sensitivity and curiosity?
Well, but when you have this sensitivity, you have also metaphysical fear, which is an adequate feeling in front of the mystery. But for comfort, people try to run away from any kind of fear, and they have illusion, they illude themselves that they are safe in their little world. But this is only illusion. And whenever such things like war, like pest arrive, you suddenly discover that you were never safe, and that being safe is a dangerous illusion. My 8 dogs, even if they are fed and they are very well, when they sleep, even their ears are up because they are never safe. They have this instinct that no being, live being, is safe ever.
The world as a garden, yes? The world which is completely safe. This is the promise of civilization. Yeah.
Yes, but a false promise.
Yeah. Yeah. How much the good old contradiction between science and religious faith is still valid in our days?
I hope it is not valid at all. It is just also a superstition and old-fashioned view from 19th century,
yeah, exactly.
From time of Engels and Feuerbach. And it is, and Renan, it is all gone. We have totally different perspective today, but that's something what we may discuss about. Unfortunately, if we are in the Catholic circle, we usually avoid any discussion with opponents. We discuss only among ourselves, so we all agree. It's very comfortable, but not very productive.
I think we can observe nowadays a paradoxical situation that scientific knowledge deconstructed itself. And from this perspective, especially in humanities, but in quantum mechanics, in quantum physics as well, from that perspective, science as a source of solid answers is as fragile as religious faith in 19th century was.
Well, but humanities created disciplines which in fact are not very scientific, but they only pretend to be. Is psychology scientific? I have my doubts. It is a knowledge, definitely. It is maybe a wisdom, but where is the method?
Yeah, but Marxists in 20th century, and Marxism is coming back somehow to the Western universities, believe that they have answers on all questions.
Right, but we already know these answers. We know they didn't work. And the anthropology was false. The whole vision of human being, according to Marx, did not realize in social reality. People are different than Marx expected. Why should workers destroy communist government? According to Marx, it is unthinkable.
Yeah, this is true.
But it happened.
This is true. Speaking about blind chance, you have mentioned already this term. What does it mean, blind chance, in the perspective of empiric science and religious faith, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I have no instrument to build my opinion. I only assume that whatever is not deterministic, and we tend to see now scientific view on material universe is that it is not deterministic. So then there is a field of this, what we call, unfortunately, blind chance, random chance. That means something what you cannot predict. When you have a Rutherford tube, you have particles, and you know how many will go left and how many will go right. But you will never know which one will go right or left. That was the old image of non-deterministic and deterministic world.
Yeah. Going in direction of art, Czesław Miłosz, in his famous poem Immorality of Art, claimed that our Platonic wish of connecting good, beauty, and truth together has nothing to do with reality. What is your take on this opinion?
I beg to differ.
Yes, but on Miłosz's side, and this is his proof, is the whole history of 20th century. And his personal experience, he said, about Anna Kamińska, for instance. She was too good person to write a good poems.
I think it is a very tendentious view, and I think Miłosz had many personal reasons to formulate such a judgment, but I don't think it is very objective and universal.
So you think this high art, which you described in your lecture, must at least make a try of bringing together those three values?
Well, when I say Thomas Mann or Albert Camus or Dostoevsky, I see that these three values are very present together in their work. So why should I doubt?
Yeah. Yeah, Dostoevsky is a good example because he, in some sense, has foreseen the barbarisms of Bolshevism in 20th century.
He was a harbinger of the revolution. There's no doubt about it, even if he wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. There is still cinema which continues a quest, a search for metaphysical problems. But what kind of position it occupies in our contemporary world? Perhaps a counterculture.
Well, in this Pontifical Commission for Culture, one of the most interesting contributions went from the Archbishop of Westminster, Catholic Archbishop, who said, our days, Christian culture has to use the experience of counterculture because we are in minority, we are not accepted as a majority before, so we have to use the same methods that were used by counterculture. I think it was a good advice, even if many other prelates were scandalized by this, saying, well, look back on the Gothic cathedrals, but they were built long time ago.
Mm-hmm. There was a stream in a big formation of counterculture of the late 60s in America. There was this Christian stream within the whole formation, because Jesus was a
hippie.
Was a hippie. was a hippie, and he was barefoot going to poor people, and he talked with everyone.
Right, but that's not contradictory to other concepts of Christianity, and I think it was some kind of the very easy Christianity. Mm-hmm. It was the Christianity without cross, and that's a very big temptation of our days, to create Christianity without suffering, without pain, without sacrifice. No way.
Mm-hmm. Let's say pop cultural outcome of this stream of this counterculture Christian art was Jesus Christ Superstar. Do you think we need now more musicals like this?
I must say, I don't know why do you address this question to me. I don't need it. But other people do, so let them go and see it.
No, but you were in this commission, so you represent...
Well, this commission was discussing other things.
Other things.
I'm afraid most of the members have never seen Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, one of my last questions touches upon the division between artistic cinema and Christian cinema. It looks like those two phenomena belong to completely different worlds. They are driven apart somehow. Do you think there is a common place between them?
I'm not sure if we may really distinguish something as a Christian art, because whatever respects Ten Commandments, and they are universal, they are not Christian, it can be considered as an ally in our divided world. Mm-hmm. So, is Kurosawa Christian? He is not, but his values are. And I don't see, there is one genre which is this Christian cinema, especially in America, when they are very, let us say, simple-minded stories, how good wins over the evil. They are very pleasant sometimes to watch, but they are very confusing because they promise something what is not going to happen. They promise paradise on this world and the justice to be executed immediately. There is no chance. Crime remains unpunished, and we have to cope with it. And maybe unhappy, but we cannot speak about mercy if there is no punishment or if there is no justice.
Mm-hmm. Describing low art or popular culture, as you said, you in in my opinion, you described the situation before the digital revolution. Now we have exploding new phenomenon of digital pop culture, these computers and TikTok and other applications. What kind of chances, according to your opinion, has metaphysical perspective in digital pop culture? Do you think it will survive this this revolution?
That you put question in a different place than I do, because you say pop culture, and pop culture has no chance for metaphysics anyway, digital or not. Mm-hmm. Simply, what is pop has to be easy. What is easy must not be metaphysical, because metaphysics brings us fear, this existential fear in front of the unknown and in front of the reality which is behind our reach. So, if it is pop culture, it must be sweet and easy, and then anti-metaphysical, just domesticated metaphysics.
No, but look, in Middle Ages, we had this Biblia Pauperum, this Biblia for those people who couldn't read, and it was specially formatted holy word for normal folks.
Right, but it was an illustration. Mm-hmm. And of course, you may illustrate the Bible, you may illustrate all parts of gossip, but it's not the message. It's just an auxiliary message, but not the essential one. So, if we have something which is in tune with the gossip, then of course it is part of Christian heritage, but it doesn't mean that it is full heritage in one work.
I would explain why I stressed this digital character of contemporary pop culture. It is important because behind digital mechanism there is no human being. It is artificial intelligence, and it is Orwellian world. George Orwell in 1984 described the culture of totalitarian reality, which was created by computers. He didn't use the word computers, but he said machines. Machines will put together some words, some music, and there will be dances for folks. So in old-fashioned pop culture, there is still somebody you can argue with, you can talk to, and you can transmit to him this message which you want to convey. So we are on the brink of a completely new system.
First of all, I think that there will be some modification, genetical modification of human being, and maybe instead of having humans, we will have superhumans, and we will be unfortunately extinct as old-fashioned humans that are not needed anymore. In fact, I thought it was a joke, but I've heard serious discussions among scientists of serious countries which really think that we have to create some sort of a super human being and give him all privileges and keep the rest as to be extinguished as an unnecessary burden of humanity that spoils the planet because consumes and pollutes. What is the danger of future? That totalitarianism will eliminate people who are unable to adjust themselves to the new situation, and who will be happy with artificial intelligence will be a winner. I hope not.
This is Aldous Huxley,
Yes,
New Brave World.
Brave World.
Yeah, yeah.
Both, but again, twice a narration went ahead of reality. So we invented horror that later on became a reality.
Yeah, this is true. Ladies and gentlemen, you have unique chance to talk to our guest. Would you like to pose some questions? And you can make comments. You can ask questions. Here I see a person who is the first. Please tell us who are you, and floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jan Bednarski. I'm a student here at JP2 Studies. Thank you, Professor, for your lecture, for your comments. I have a question regarding hope. So we are in the Jubilee year of hope. You mentioned wisdom as something necessary for cinematography. I would like to ask you whether you think that hope is also something necessary. Was it an important thing for you in your work? And and maybe how do you relate wisdom to hope?
I would put it this way, that hope is a natural consequence of sense. If my existence and my world make sense, I have hope. I don't need to look for it, I have it. And when I have an intuition that this world is an effect of total chaos and is senseless, and my personal existence is totally unnecessary, then there is no hope. There is despair, and there is later on, you have suicide as a logical consequence of despair. And we have so many suicides nowadays because so many people lose their intuition that life makes sense and our life individually is justified. So it is almost the same, hope and sense. Well, when cinema shows me that there is love, that there are values, then there is hope. And when I wonder, in Dostoevsky is for me full of hope, and at the same time he is one of the most pessimistic portraits of humanity he is presenting. But in the depths there is hope. The same with Camus, who was never really he was never a genuine atheist, even if he claimed that he was.
If you are satisfied, then we can switch to another question. Who would like to? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Brother Alessandro Monti. I'm a student of the Angelicum here. You made a very sharp distinction between highbrow and lowbrow art. However, it seems to me that the very point of Christian art is to bring a very sophisticated message to a popular audience, starting from the gospel. So the gospel is a kind of art that is both very sophisticated and popular, and the same could be applied to, I don't know, Dante's Divine Comedy or the frescoes by Michelangelo. So why couldn't we have something very sophisticated that appeals to the masses?
Well, simply because the elasticity of the artistic means is a little bit limited. There are some phenomena like Charlie Chaplin, who was sophisticated and very simple-minded, and he acted on both levels. Albert Einstein loved his films. However, we don't know how good was taste of Albert Einstein. And at the same time, illiterate workers were also laughing at his films. But you cannot expect this to happen. That is something against the nature, because the language is limiting you, and for a sophisticated message, you need a sophisticated language. very seldom you can find simple expression of real values. But if you manage, lucky you are.
Actually, Walter Benjamin, a very influential philosopher, German philosopher, said that particularly Charles Chaplin films are proofs that in our age of mechanical reproduction of art, where the object of art has no metaphysical aura anymore, could convey this metaphysical meaning to the wide masses. So this is exactly the example of Walter Benjamin, but he didn't give any other example.
Right, and when you take Eric Romer, whom I admire, he is not addressed to the most common public, definitely not.
Okay, who would like to pose the next questions or make a comment or share any impression?
Good afternoon. Father Paweł Kulecki, Society of the Missionaries of Africa. Thank you for... I'm very touched, personally. I spent a half of my young life in Africa in quite poor areas. So now, being here in Rome, I'm trying to update myself. Even when I was in Africa, I was following your films and some interviews. I remember once I started to watch an interview with you, and my internet connection was so poor that I didn't finish it. But there was a question about the truth. And you said that in your films, you are trying to show the truth. And my connection cut. So my question is, why? And today, for you, what the truth is? Thank you.
Well, I'm very sorry that the connection was interrupted. That is my loss, but maybe in future we'll have more luck. You know, whenever I say something in public, whenever I address other people, I must ask myself the question, what is the purpose and what is good in it? And if I were myself in a state of despair, I would keep it quiet and I wouldn't share it with the others, I think. Because I believe that the mission of an artist is to cheer up people who are in crisis, who are on the edge of despair. And truth is always helpful. Even cruel truth is make us feel more realistic about our condition. Well, these are all phrases which are a little bit abstract. But whenever I choose what story to tell, if I have a right to choose, because sometimes I don't have it, I think what will be an impact, if there is going to be an impact on what I have said or not. And if this impact can be positive, I hope it will. I haven't made a downer, something that will make people upset. But look at the genre's horror is meant to be a pseudo-metaphysical experience. Pseudo because the whole sense of horror film, horror novel, is that you finish, breathe deeply and say, oh, thanks God it is not real. And I want to finish my work and people say, thanks God it is real. It's a hell of a difference.
Okay. Thank you. So, who else? Yes, please.
So maybe one more question. You recalled a conversation in the Pontifical Commission about using in the cinema, using the same methods in the cinema as counterculture is using. And could you repeat what's your stance on this point? And also, what do you think about using the same language? So not only the methods, but also the language of the counterculture in the cinema, which wants to spread good values.
I have some difficulty with the second part of your question because I don't believe that counterculture created some definite language. There are many languages, but the whole process of creating something what has a special address, this was typical for counterculture. It was not addressing, let's say in cinema, the cinema in Grand Boulevard, the cinema of the big exposure. They were, from the very beginning, saying, okay, we have our small circuit of lovers, of followers, of admirers, and address them and create a new community of people who like this kind of poetry, this kind of music, this kind of art. That was the method. Not trying to fight, not creating colossal, as Italians say, colossal projects that would compete with the opposite orientation, but do it on a small scale and address it directly to people who may receive it. It is more or less a transition because in the 50s, whatever was believed to be Christian was usually something like Ben-Hur or something similar, or Quo Vadis, all these great performances of mostly exposing set design, but content very, very simple-minded, to tell the truth.
Yes, please.
Krzysztof, I'm Giorgio Pezzali. You remember me, I think. I had the luck to work with you in 1980s. In the first film you made about John Paul II. And my question is, at the moment, in 1980s, the world was divided in two parts, the East and Western. And it was very difficult situation politically, and we were all frightened where we were shooting John Paul II and the first film. And my question is, do you find some analogies in the actual situation? And in the past we had the hope that the world could change. Now, what do you think? There are hope that we can change something as in the past?
I would say shortly, I have less hope that the world will change into a better one, but I still have hope that the world will survive, what is already very optimistic, because there are many indications that this world which we are creating now may not survive, and that it will be replaced by some dinosaurs. And of course, in my bad dreams, I imagine that angry grandfather says, okay, enough with humans. Let us go back to dinosaurs. They were more promising.
At the end, I would like to come back to one of your keywords from your lecture. This word is mystery. The field of mystery is something which brings together scientific knowledge, scientific inquiry, and artistic inquiry. It is somehow close to what surrealists believed at the beginning of 20th century. What is your what kind of feelings do you have regarding surrealist? Because I don't find many surrealistic moments in your films. Maybe I'm wrong.
Probably not, and of course I don't analyze my own works. But I liked surrealism for a very simple reason, that it was using craft. That was the last tendency in painting, where craft was present. They were all professional painters. Later on,
And film masters like Buñuel.
right? They were inspired, and I think it is an area that you may exploit probably, but it was a very short-lasting, quite of a wave that passed. But I'm rather sympathetic to it.
Sympathetic. Yeah?
Yes, okay. I'm not allergic, definitely.
Yeah.
There are some currents where I am allergic, that's no doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guest speakers, Professor Zanussi and Dr. Werner, for this great discussion. Thank you to our audience here in Aula 11 of the Angelicum and behind the screens. The next event, organized by the St. John Paul II Institute of Culture, will be held on April 13th to mark the 25 years since the canonization of Sister Faustina Kowalska. We'll be discussing the mystery of divine mercy in a theological approach and looking for places in the world today which are in special need of works of mercy. Please save the date and be sure to join us then. We will now have a short technical break, maximum 5-10 minutes, and the online broadcast of our conference will